Welcome back to another episode of STEM in Stilettos. I'm your host, Zofia Morales, and today we are going to take on the topic of resilience redefined, how female entrepreneurs can conquer stress in the digital age. Before we swing into that, I'd like to invite you to get to know a little bit about your own leadership style by taking the What is Your Leadership Pitfall Quiz. You can find that at leadershippitfallquiz.com. And for a 2-minute investment of your time, you can get some insight into the pros and cons of the leadership style you've been using and find better, more effective ways to move forward if that applies. So, thank you for joining me today. Our guest is Françoise Netier. Netter, sorry. I always want to put that extra I in there. She is an author, educator, and conference presenter, and has been a leading innovator in the fields of yoga, dance therapy, creativity, resiliency, trauma, and stress management for over 40 years. She's been recognized by the Marquis Who's Who as a prominent professional in her fields of expertise. She's taught at numerous universities as well as in major Fortune 500 companies, including Stanford University, Santa Clara University, University of Phoenix, Apple Computers, Oracle, Clorox Corporation, Hewlett-Packard, Sun Microsystems, and IBM. Françoise has been featured on television, radio, YouTube, and several CDs and in magazines and newspaper articles, including the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Jose Mercury News, the Boulder Camera, the Health Club magazine, and on numerous podcasts and online venues. Her book, Movement for the Mind, Dance that Awakens Inspiration, Wisdom, and Healing, offers individuals of all walks of life an opportunity to integrate their creativity and apply it both personally and professionally. Her work focuses on the subject of resiliency and trauma and is the subject of her next book and TEDx talk. Welcome, Françoise. It's so nice to have you with us today.
Hello, Sophia. It's so good to be here again with you.
Yes, Françoise has been a frequent flyer with us. She was on Sovereign Self when we were doing Sovereign Self, and we brought her back over here when we moved towards tech founders because, good Lord, is there stress in tech?
Oh, an understatement, yes.
So, why is this subject relevant to female tech founders? Why do we need to deal with our stress, Françoise? But can we rest when we're dead?
Oh, I've been involved with some people who've had near-death experiences, and apparently we don't rest when we're dead.
Okay, so we need to work it in while we're on this side.
We do. So I think one of, the main subjects that we have to look at is in this 21st century plus, because we're into it. The one thing that we seem to not have is balance. And women, especially, are doing everything. I mean, it was only what, 50 years ago that we got the vote,
Yeah.
and women weren't allowed to wear pants
Mm-hmm.
in school and
Or in public for that
in
matter.
public, exactly. And so what has happened is that there are more women now that are the breadwinners. We're still having the children. Men
Yes.
haven't learned how to do that one yet. And it's like you don't have that prototype anymore where the woman just stays home and takes care of the kids. So
Just takes care of the kids and all the
just
housework
takes
and all
care.
that
Yeah,
domestic engineering.
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So what we've got is we've got women who are working, who are taking care of families, who are taking care of many of them are single family households. And we still have not pierced that glass ceiling. Women are making a considerable less than men. So what happens in corporations, and I think really in the technology department of work and of organizations, is they're having to step up and be even better than men instead of bringing that feminine into their work. So stress becomes their daily diet. And
Yeah.
what we don't realize is, and I was teaching stress management in the 1980s in Silicon Valley. And at that time, there was not a lot of research on stress management. Basically, it said you're either type A or you're type B. If you're type
Exactly. And
A,
I
then
definitely scored as type A.
yeah, then you're vulnerable to the effects of stress. And if you're type B, well, then, stress just sort of rolls off your back or your shoulders. What
Yeah.
we know today
Not the
is
truth.
that everyone's stressed, everyone's type A.
Yeah.
And what we also know in all of the research, the medical research, is that stress is the number one cause of all diseases, physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Mm.
What we've come to understand in epigenetics, in psychoneuroimmunology, in neuroscience, is that the brain is in every cell of the body, and so are the emotions. So,
Yes.
what affects the mind affects the body. What affects the body affects the mind and the emotions. So, when you are highly stressed, it's not that stress itself is bad. It's when it's not turned off. And I'll
Yes.
explain about that because it's so important for women today to understand what's going on in their own bodies, what's going on in their own minds, what's going on in their own emotions. And the reason for that is if you understand what's going on within you, you can take action to
Yes.
heal, change, and choose a different modality. And I really want to
Exactly.
talk about the brain and certain chemicals that we secrete during stress and why it's so important to know
Yeah.
this.
Well, and you mentioned, past 50 years we've had the vote and women have really started moving into the workplace and the rise into prominence of the single parent household,
Yes.
which is primarily women again. The other thing that goes right along with that is the increase in the prevalence of what were previously considered guy diseases, the increase in heart attacks, the increase of stroke in the female population that was not there
Cancer,
before. Cancer.
depression,
Yes, exactly.
suicide,
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
drug addiction,
mm-hmm.
alcohol addiction,
Work addiction,
work
which
addiction.
which I think is probably a very common one among highly ambitious people.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's all well and good to talk about, oh, well, stress, right? But then there's all this day to day stuff that's happening, and there are fires to be put out, and there's money to be raised, and there are people to be managed, and broken systems that need fixed, and all of that stuff that comes along with founding a company. How do you manage all of that and still get this break that you're talking about in the stress cycle? How do you make that happen? I know I have trouble when I go to bed at night, like turning the brain off so it will just hush.
And in the middle of the night, that's when my
Yeah,
brain
it
does
spins up
all the
around
fixing.
3 a.m. Yes.
I think it's taking back the power to understand, and I really want to outline this. So again, I said it a little bit earlier, stress is not the problem. What the problem is the leaky faucet of stress.
Mm.
And what we know is that, so a leaky faucet, I don't know if any of you have had a leaky faucet. I remember
Oh, yeah.
I had a cat who was having kidney problems and she would only drink water from the bathtub. So I had to constantly run that water. And then all of a sudden, the the faucet became a leaky one and it started
Oh,
to
you couldn't
rust.
turn it off.
No, and it started to rust the pipes. So
Oh,
I had to, completely get someone in to, it was very expensive, change the plumbing, etc. So we're not that different. What is so extraordinary about our bodies is that we secrete an extraordinary amount of hormones very naturally. We secrete, and I'm going to break it down into two types. I'm going to be a
sure.
little scientific with you right now.
You
And
can
for
do that for a minute. We're big girls. We could take that.
all right, so we tend to secrete two major hormones. One is called opiopeptides,
Uh-huh.
and the other one is called glucocorticoids. Big name,
Big
big
words.
word. So
And are they similar or are they
they're
opposed to it?
opposite.
They're
So
opposites. Okay.
glucocorticoids are what we find, they're like cortisol, adrenaline. And what happens when we're stressed out, especially in the 21st century? What do we do when we haven't slept or not? What happens when we wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and we don't go back to sleep? Okay, 5 a.m., got to get up, got to get to the office, got to take care of the
Caffeine.
kids. Caffeine, Red Bull, um, uppers, everything we can. And what does that do? That creates more of the glucocorticoids. And what we now know about cortisol and glucocorticoids is they are what we now talk about as the fight flight
Freeze. Yeah.
syndrome, right?
Uh-huh.
So there's nothing wrong with fight flight. When we were cave women and cavemen, we needed it because when the tiger would come to the cave and attack our kiddos, we either had to fight them or
Or
we
run
had to
away.
flee them. Exactly.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
issue is not the glucocorticoids. The issue is that we start secreting, just like that leaky faucet that created rust in my pipes that I had to replace. We're doing the same thing in our bodies. Now, someone might say, well, so what? It's just my body. However,
Yeah, until your body's not working.
well, and more important, and this is so important for our readers to know this. And this is science 101. All right. In 5 minutes, I'm teaching you this in 5 minutes. What happens is that it begins to break down not just the body, but because we know in psychoneuroimmunology that every cell in the body is connected to each other. So if you're stressed out mentally, it affects your physical well-being.
Yes, your little toe knows it.
If you're stressed out emotionally, it begins to break down the body as well. So
Yes.
it's one system, and it's what can cause heart attacks at the age of 30, strokes. I mean, we're seeing, I've worked a lot with educators and I teach them this, and they're seeing kiddos that are
Yes.
depressed earlier and earlier, and special needs just growing in every way because there's so much going on in our world, from deportation to the split of families to money issues to food issues to environmental issues. So that leaky faucet is almost like a non-stop situation going on,
Yes.
and it's affecting all of us in a hyper way. So that's the bad news. Let's go to the
Yes.
good news. Are
Let's
we
go to the
ready for
good
the good
news. Is
news?
that this other class of compounds here?
So this other class of, and I'm going to talk about this, is so important. The other class of compounds, they're actually hormones within our own body, are called opiopeptides. And just like the word opium, yes, and my favorite perfume actually, opiopeptides are the feel-good hormones. And both of these hormones they're not outside of us. They're within our own brain and body. They're our own brain and body chemistry. And why is that so powerful? Because it means we have a choice.
We can
Uh,
turn them on.
turn them on and turn them off. And we're going to go into that in a minute. So, as you can tell, I'm very French. I talk with
Ah, it's
my
all
hands.
good. That's one of the reasons we adore you.
So, some of the opioid that we know about that the brain secretes, serotonin, melatonin, my favorite, oxytocin.
Yes.
And what's really interesting is that I believe it was the 1980s there, and this is really important. There was a study done on the brain on depression. And at that time, what they psychiatrists decided, well, if ecstasy, I don't know if any of your readers have heard of the drug ecstasy,
Heard of, yes.
if ecstasy can make you feel bliss and fantastic,
And like you love the entire world.
right, then maybe what it could do is it could cure severe depression. So what they did is they did a study on that, and they gave their participants very high doses of ecstasy to try to cure depression. And what they found, to actually their horror, was not only did it not cure depression, but these high doses of ecstasy actually depleted the brain's ability to manufacture its own levels of
Oh,
serotonin and feel good hormones.
so it
So,
cut you off at the knees to be able to do that.
exactly. So, what we want to do is we want to create for each, and everybody's very unique. We want to create an inner environment and an outer environment that allows you to be aware, number one, when you're leaking the glucocorticoids, you're going to love that word and you're going to love saying it, and how to invoke the opioid.
That
And
sounds like a skill we'd all like to learn, like real fast.
I'm going to talk about how to do that and a little bit about the brain so that you can actually become conscious when you're leaking those glucocorticoids and how to pause and then create an inner and an outer environment to bring in the opioid.
I love that. So
So I'm
we're
gonna,
coming up on our first break here. So I'm gonna
okay,
put
great.
a little tiny pin in that because I know everybody's gonna want to have their notepad and their pen ready for that when we come back from the break. Um, wow. I generally give a little bit of homework over the break. And I think what I'm going to suggest that you do with your pen and paper while you're waiting for us to
Yes,
return
yes.
from what pays the bills, uh, get your pen, get your piece of paper, and spend some time on the things that you know right now, the places that you know you walk into and your stress just like shoots through the roof. It might
Where
be
is your leaky faucet?
where are you dripping?
Yeah,
Yeah, make a list of
exactly.
the top like 3 or 4 places you're dripping and hang with us. We'll be right back from the break. Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales, and I'm still here with the amazing and wonderful and very French François Netter.
Françoise.
Françoise, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Minus, minus un. So
Oh,
there we are. You gave us a little tease before we went to break about how we can become aware of where we're leaking these corticosteroids and how we can shut that faucet down and turn on the feel goods so that we can have a break from that continual drip, drip, drip. I think of it as like Chinese water torture.
it's a great way to think of it. No, it is. And
Yeah,
again, it's not, we know with our bones that when we're growing, or even as we get older, that we want to stress our bones so they continue being strong. So,
right.
so again, it's not that stress is the bad word. It's when it becomes unconscious and it becomes a way of life. And for
Mm-hmm.
most of us, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. I know when I was growing up in this, well, I was born in the 60s, so I grew up in the 70s and the early 80s, and like the superwoman, she brings home the bacon, fries it up in the pan, Angeli, right? um, it was like you're supposed to embrace all that stress and bring it
Mm.
into your life. And
Mm-mm.
yeah, I that didn't work very well for me.
It really doesn't work for anyone.
So
And
how do we become aware of our leaking points? We did a little exercise over the break where we wrote down 3 or 4 places where it's like, oh my God, I hate it when I have to do a handoff with my co-parent or whatever the situation is, going into the office and dealing with this particular person, right? We all have these places where it's bad. So once we've got that little list, or is there something we need to do in addition to that little list to know where we're leaking?
yeah, so what I'm going to do, I wanted during the break, I spoke with Sophia about my favorite quotation around all this, and in California, there was a gentleman, Michael Murphy, who was actually, they often think of him as the grandfather of the human potential movement. And he coined a phrase that I just adore. And then I've changed it when I work for educators, and I'll quote both. So what he said, and is that we are all bartenders of our own soul. And what I say for kiddos is we are all chefs in our own kitchen. So, what that means is being aware and conscious of when we're leaking glucocorticoids or stress hormones
Yes.
and how to shift them. So, there are a couple of metaphors that I'm going to put out.
Okay.
My favorite, and I do it vertically. So if you all have your pen and paper, I want you to write vertically BEACH.
Beach. Okay.
Exactly. That for me, even that word, even though I live in the mountains, I keep craving the beach.
Indeed. Sun, sand, surf. What's
Oh
not to
my
love?
goodness. So we're going to start with B. And is it okay if I give everyone an assignment? Your
Sure.
assignment is to come up with 2 to 3 words for each letter that speak to you what I call the yum factor.
The yum factor. Oh, goody.
So I'm going to come up with some, and it's really important, and I'm going to explain them and how then you can bring that into your life.
Yeah, because they need to be custom to you.
So the first thing I want to do, though, before we go into that, we're going to be
Oh,
anticipating. The gifts are coming, I promise.
okay.
Is I want to explain a little bit more about the brain, if that's okay.
Yeah, just a little bit
A
more.
little bit more about the brain. So in our normal state, and especially women who are in charge, who are CEOs, CFOs, whatever their title, they are, most of us from about the age of 12 on, are in the beta brainwave state. Beta brainwave state is the way we talk, our intellectual mind, it's the left brain.
Logical, reasonable, all the things.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now, the issue happens when we go into high beta. High beta is that leaky faucet. It's that stress level. It's like, I'm in charge of this, this, and this. And then when I go home, I got to do this, this, and this. And your brain is constantly going in
It's
high beta.
that overwhelm.
And if it's your
And
normal day, you're not even aware that it's an overwhelm. That's why being conscious of when you're leaking your faucet is so important. Okay, so most of us we spend our life in beta and high beta.
yeah.
Now, what is really important when I go down to the BEACH acronym
Mhm.
is that we want to bring our brains into an alpha, at least into an alpha brain wave state. As young kiddos, that joyful laughter, that imagination that young kiddos have is
Yeah.
because they spend until the age of 10 to 12, they spend, their brain is in alpha, which is a slower, much more creative brain wave.
Yes. It's
So,
alpha and theta, right? That's where the hypnotists like to take you, is
yes,
down in
and
there.
then into delta and gamma.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put that out, and then I'm going to talk about the BEACH acronym and how it relates to those brain waves.
Yeah. Okay. Do tell.
So we're going to start with the B. And one of the most important words for B is breathing.
Breathe. Yes. We like
And I
breathe.
actually have a CD, which is an MP3, where I teach a very, very powerful breathing exercise called the complete breath. And I have my students and I have my clients do this complete breath for 5 minutes twice a day. And you can do it anywhere. You can do it in the car, you can do it in the bathroom. If you do it in the car, you cannot close your eyes.
Well, okay. If you're
If
sitting
you're
in front of the
driving,
school waiting for the kiddos to come out and climb in
then
the
you
car,
can
you're good.
close your eyes.
Then you're okay.
Disclaimer. So, breathing, we might say, is an oxymoron. But the
Well, a
great,
lot of us, when we hear this, it's like I breathe all the time. What's special about this?
yes. So, the great yogis understood that in Sanskrit, the word breath is called prana. And prana is another word for life force. So,
Ah,
what we know is when we stop breathing, the life goes out of the body.
yeah.
What's so important about bringing breathing into conscious awareness is we know this even in hospitals. We know this in psychiatric facilities. We know this when people are having a mental breakdown. What do we say to them? Breathe,
Breathe,
breathe.
breathe. Well, and you don't make good decisions when you're in that really tensed up state and you're not getting a deep breath. Your ability to make a good choice is greatly deteriorated.
So the breath that I teach, and there are many, the yogis understand many, many different breathing practices. But the breathing I teach is called the complete breath, and it invokes all five lobes of the lungs. Most women are just chest breathers, very
Mm-hmm.
shallow right here. Most
Yeah.
men are belly breathers. And what we do in the complete breath is we work the entire belly diaphragm, chest, all the way up to the throat.
Very good.
And then we go down that same journey. And I teach people how to do that. And what's interesting about women is women don't tend to do the breath, the breath of the breath, literally the
Mhm.
width of the breath.
Expanding outwards. Yes.
Exactly. And what this breathing exercise, even in 5 minutes, will do is it will bring you into the alpha brainwave state, which will interrupt those glucocorticoids.
Nice.
So, another word that I love is beauty.
Oh, yes.
And the reason I love that word beauty is because it allows us to pause a moment to see whether it's plants or flowers or a gorgeous painting or a piece of necklace.
Or
And
amazing architecture or whatever it is.
and what's interesting, or a kiddo or
A kitten or
our
a puppy or,
animals,
yeah.
exactly. And I'm going to quote someone who's pretty extraordinary. I'm going to quote a gentleman that some of your listeners and viewers may have heard of, Viktor Frankl. And
Mm.
Viktor Frankl was a survivor of three camps. And he became a psychiatrist and wrote one of his most famous books. It was Man's Search for Meaning. And I
Yes.
recommend that book to anyone in a body. And what he spoke about is that the reason the Nazis were so successful in not only killing bodies, but killing the spirit was because they created an environment completely devoid of all beauty.
Mm.
All the camps were in the most desolate, rainy, dreary environments where there were no flowers, no plants, only barbed wire. They dressed the prisoners in the
Gray.
worst fabric, in the
Yeah.
most drab of gray and white. It was so hard on the body because it was like burlap. So
Mm.
it itched it, and they shaved everybody's head so everybody looked the same. And the prisoners were shot if they invoked any poetry, any art, any music, any dance, or anything that allowed them to feel anything that was beautiful. So,
Mm.
beauty is very important, and we take it for granted. But anything that you can do that allows you to be awake, aware of beauty.
You know what? I'm feeling better about my willingness to spend a little more for better aesthetics. Because there's this little voice in my mind that's like, yeah, you're going to pay $2 more for the sparkly pink one. Yes, yes, I am. And now I feel better about that.
And again, and so another one I'll bring up is God, you can come up with so many, and they relate them to you because all of
Yeah.
us are unique, and that uniqueness needs to be celebrated. So another one can be being,
Mm,
how long is it since you just bead?
exactly. My favorite place to bead is in the bathtub soaking
What a great, and you can
because no one intrudes on you. You've got the door, you've got the nice warm water, you've got the bubbles or the salt or the fragrance or whatever makes you happy. And it's an amazing place to just be.
be being in the bathtub.
Yeah.
You can do double words. And also, if you are a mother, have your kiddos do this because
Mm.
kids are they're in hyper beta as well. They're in high beta.
Well,
So
because we train them into it, the school encourages it. Yeah. So we're coming up on our next break. We need to start moving into EACH if we're
we
going to
will
get
go
there.
faster. So should we go into E real quickly?
Let's do that.
Okay, E, expression. So one of the things that I think we stop doing, especially when we're in leadership roles, is we feel like we have to fit in. And if we're just being ourselves authentically, nah, that's not good enough. So
Mm,
self-expression is so important, whether it's in, wearing a piece of jewelry or we'll talk about laughter later, but
yes.
expression, and we tend to repress everything,
Mm,
and that's where the leaky faucet really can happen. We think that
not that big a deal. I'm just going to dress like everybody else at the office. And yeah, it adds
expression and
up.
also having a safe place to express emotions.
Yes. Well, and sometimes the office is a more of a safe place than other times, but there are places you can get it outside of the office as well.
And then experience, being aware of just experiencing things again.
You know, I
Exercise.
exercise. That's a really good one for turning on the feel good chemicals at
Absolutely.
some
That's
point.
not negotiable for me.
All right. What does A look like on your personal beach?
Well, the biggest word for A, I think, is awareness. And another one that people talk a lot about is attitude of gratitude and appreciation. And I think we don't pause enough for that. Our lives get so busy, our lives get so difficult,
Mm,
so challenging. And I think an attitude of gratitude and awareness, that's so important. The more
yeah,
aware we can be, the more we can pause and then shift our mindset, shift
exactly.
our body, shift our emotions.
I had a huge lesson around the attitude of gratitude from my bonus mom. My dad remarried late in life, and she was such a lovely woman. And she would come home from a long trip and she would come in the house and she would say, "Hello, little house. I'm back. We missed you. We really appreciate you." And she would talk to the house about what she loved about the house. I'm like, wow, I take a lot of shit for granted.
Well, and it's not a false sense of gratitude. I think what happens is that appreciation. It's not falsely appreciating. It's like,
No, I think she really truly was appreciating the
yes,
house when she returned to it,
awake.
which is I aspire to that level of gratitude and appreciation.
Well, and what's really interesting is, in the 90s and the 80s, they did experiments with water and they noticed that the molecules of water would change when you would talk to the water with love in your heart, with appreciation, that the molecules would completely change. This was science.
Yeah.
So, yes. And
So
again, you
we
can bring in so many different things that you can bring in with A.
absolutely. So we are up on our second break already. So we'll have to come back for C and H after the
Perfect.
break. But your assignment over the break is to think about your BEA part of it. What what do those letters really represent for you in terms of things that make you go, ah, oh, this is wonderful, this is joyful, this shifts my being and my emotions and my attitude.
Perfect.
And so spend a little time with that, and we'll be right back from the break. Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales, and I'm here with the amazing and wonderful Françoise Netter. I got it right this time. Yay!
Perfect. You're perfect.
2 points for me. So before the break, we were going through beach and we'd spelled out some words or reminders about things that can take us down out of our overwhelmed stress level and into a more calm, centered opio. What did you call it?
Opiopeptides.
Opiopeptide dictated existence. So, talk to us about C and H.
Well, you said a beautiful word, calm,
Mm,
right? Calm.
yeah,
And I'm going to talk about something that control. So, what is it that
it's an
stresses?
illusion.
Well, I want to talk about this because it's really, really important.
Yeah,
So, if you look at our Western world, right? And what is it that everyone who thinks that they're powerful wants?
control. You
Control.
bet. You bet. In fact,
And
any
and
mother that's living in chaos wants a little control in her household.
and what's so interesting is when we feel out of control, what happens? We go into stress like nobody's business. I go into it. My thing is I don't get depressed, I get anxious. That,
Mm,
and I go into anxiety if I can't control something.
yeah.
So what do we do with that word? Well, it's a really important word. What certain practices I'm going to talk about that invoke the alpha brainwave state allow you to do is to stop looking, especially when we feel anxious and stressed, for that control externally. But
Yeah, because it's not out there.
well, there's still an
Yeah,
illusion that it is, and I don't think there's anybody alive today in the Western world, woman or man, that doesn't want to try to control stuff out there.
exactly.
However, what we do have, and why Michael Murphy's quote is so important. We are each bartenders of our own soul. We each are chefs in our own kitchen. Where is the kitchen? Where is the soul? It's that
Inside us.
it's
Yes.
within us. It's within us. So when we learn certain practices that can bring us into calm and control of our actions, control
Mm.
of our responses, control of our own thoughts and emotions. How important is that? It's probably the most important thing in the world
And I think a
because
lot of people have never experienced the control of your own thoughts and emotions. I know for
it's,
decades I felt like I was a victim to them.
but it's so true.
Yeah.
And what are we taught? We're taught if we just take enough drugs, if we take enough medication,
Have
if
another
we
beer.
well, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with having a beer or wine or a cocktail or anything. It's it's the power we well,
Give it.
I'll talk about that in a moment because
The
I
power we
love
give
my
away
wine.
to
I'm
it.
very
Yeah.
French, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's when we give our control over to our environment, over to the external world to such an extent that it can break us and it can make us. So we just have to gently, slowly learn how to take that control within us
Mm.
and to practice certain habits that allow us to feel greater control within ourselves, that help us feel calmer, that allow us to take challenge as an opportunity. That's difficult for all of us to see a challenge as an opportunity, not as something that breaks us. So again, I want you to find as many C words, but control's an important one. I'm
Yeah.
going to now take more control over my reactions and responses, my thoughts and my emotions. Not
Yeah, I
repression, but choice. A
exactly.
choice.
I had a friend who was through an extreme life-changing event, lost like four fingers on one hand. And his takeaway from that was it's not about what happens to you, it's about what you do afterwards. It's how you choose to choose. There's another C word. It's how you
It
choose to
is. It's an
respond
important one.
to what has arrived in your world.
Yeah, it means that you need to dig deeper into you. And I know that for women that are very busy, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time. But
Five minutes.
one of my teachers used to say, you don't not have time.
Yeah, it's all in what you're choosing to spend it on.
And 5 minutes of breathing
Yeah.
can really make a difference. So I'm going to give you all that assignment. Now, H, let's go to H.
Well,
H is my favorite.
quick before we
Okay.
switch to H, that 5 minutes that she talked about there, it's easy to go, oh, 5 minutes, that doesn't make a difference. But I was reading a book on change the other day, and here's what they've discovered: 5 minutes every day takes you farther than a concentrated 50 minutes on one day in a week. So
It,
give yourself that 5 minutes and you will make more progress than somebody who just sets aside a chunk of time one day a week to deal with it.
and C is really important too. One more, conscious, becoming conscious, conscious of what's happening inside of you as well as outside of you. And that's where we have choice, and that's where we can take control.
Yeah, exactly. Observe yourself interacting with life. It's
Conscious.
really, really informative. So tell us about H, since H is your favorite.
So H, humor.
Oh, gotta love humor. If you can't laugh at it, you got a problem.
So, find ways to invoke that laughter, to invoke that sense of lightness. And I remember, and this was decades and decades ago, I was in a head-on collision. I was in the most
Oh,
successful time of my life. And at the time, I was living with my best friend, a woman. She was my roommate and also she reparented me. She was my soul sister. And she said, she put me in her bed and she put on funny movies.
you are going to
And
laugh your
it's,
way whole again.
well, and it's really true because, we look at health, humor, honoring.
Well, and I think help is one of these things that we've kind of been trained out of receiving as women. At least that's been my experience. It's in the environment I grew up in. If you asked for help, it was a sign that you weren't good enough or you were weak or something like that. And what that does to a woman is it isolates you from other women because women together are powerful. And
And
if you look at how guys succeed, they succeed as teams. They don't
exactly,
backstab each other. They pull
exactly.
together for a common cause. And we are trained not to do that as women, and we need to get over that shit.
And health, if you don't have your health, so I've been through a lot in this life. And I was actually one of the most traumatic things physically that's ever happened to me was I was hit by a car while walking. And that happened in
Mm,
2022, December 1st. And
wow.
I was in California in my happy place, which was no longer a happy place. And your health is really important. And
Yeah, you can't do
and
much without it.
and being conscious of the things that hurt you in your body, in your mind, in your heart, An H. There's another one, heart. I
Heart.
think one of the things that is missing on this earth plane, and I just heard Pope Francis talking about it today, and I know he passed today, but he said, what this world is missing is heart. And I think as women, we must invoke that practice. And I don't care how many people are underneath you. You are not weak if you invoke your heart in compassion, in empathy. They're all in the beach vocabulary, right?
Yeah, empathy will just go right back to the second letter and put her in there.
Compassion for C, right?
Yes,
And heart. So health, humor, heart.
I love that. So, talk to us a little bit about what happens when trauma arrives in your world, because that's like stress multiplied. How do you cope with that when it shows up? Because sometimes things like breathing seem a little inadequate sometimes in the face of extreme setback and hurt.
Well, in my work, and I do it in workshops, and I do it privately, I talk about healing trauma, activating joy. And very briefly, there are 5 prongs of trauma, and those are physical, mental, emotional, sexual,
Mm-hmm.
and intergenerational. And the first thing is the same thing that I talk about in terms of stress, becoming aware,
Yes,
becoming conscious of that which you want to push aside. And when you do that, the work that I do in terms of healing it is I use a form of movement that I've pioneered called movement for the mind. And it invokes the alpha brainwave state in a conscious way that allows you to express without re-traumatizing any of it,
please.
not to repress, but to express and then transform. And in that transformation, moving from trauma to thriving to contribution. And that's why that H, that heart, is so important. And what I love about what you're doing, Zofia, is that you're bringing it to women. And we women, I think this is our time. We must lead from the heart. Doesn't mean we're not powerful. Doesn't mean we can't get the job done. Doesn't
Doesn't mean
mean,
we can't do the thing that we have to hold our nose to do. It,
no, but it
yeah,
means we do it with compassion and heart and the awareness that everyone can prosper. Not just one, not just two, but all of us together,
right.
individually
Exactly.
and together. And that diversity makes it yummy.
Exactly. So we're down to our last few minutes of the show
Oh
here.
my goodness.
I know it went so fast. I know you brought a gift with you,
I did.
and you also talked about the MP3 of the complete breath. So you're going to need to make a choice, and we'll just put the other one in the show notes. Which
All
one do you
right.
want to talk about here today?
So I just want to say 2 things real quick. So the gift is 15-minute consultation with me. You can go to my website. And the MP3 is called Redress Your Stress. It has 5 exercises on it, including the breathing, all under 12 minutes. Anybody can do it. Anybody can download it. I have it on my phone. And so those are the 2 things. I also have a book and another CD, MP3 on movement.
Yes. And you will be able to find her website down in the show notes so you can connect up with all that and keep up with what she's doing next because she's a busy woman and is always having amazing events that can really help bring perspective to your life. And a lot of times when we get busy, 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 overwhelmed, the perspective is really easy to lose. What's
Yeah.
really important.
Glucocorticoids, no leaky faucets.
No, no more leaky faucets. We're going to breathe. We're going to exercise. We're going to move. We're going to express ourselves. We're going to be aware of what's going on. We're going to shift our attitudes into
Wonderful.
gratitude. We're going to be calm. We're going to have that inner control. We're going to choose and be conscious and have humor and help and honor and health, and most of all, heart. Thank you so much for joining me today, Françoise.
Oh, thank you so much.
And thank you to all the listeners out there. You listener, you took time out of your day to spend time with us here, and we appreciate that. And we hope we gave you great value for the time that you've invested with us. If you have any topics you'd like to see me address, any guests you feel like I should be bringing on or discussing, please drop me a quick email to Zofia, Zofia, at STEMinstilettos.com, and we will get that information and those expressions out here for you. And until next week, go out, be bold, be beautiful, and we will come back and discuss breaking barriers and the role of mentorship in your entrepreneurial success.